Sit back, relax, and welcome to Reading Hours. Today's book is Dracula by Bram Stoker. Please let us know in the comments from where you are watching, or if there is a book you want us to summarize in future. Jonathan Harker, a young English solicitor, embarks on a journey to Transylvania to meet a client, Count Dracula. His travel takes him through the eerie and foreboding Carpathian Mountains, where he notices the nervous behavior of the locals upon hearing Dracula's name. The villagers, deeply entrenched in their superstitions, warn him not to continue his trip, pressing rosaries and charms into his hands for protection. Their fear unsettles Harker, but he dismisses it as mere ignorance and folklore. As night falls, he is picked up by a mysterious black carriage sent by the Count himself. The journey to Castle Dracula is unnerving. Wolves howl in the distance. Strange blue flames flicker along the road, and Harker senses an otherworldly presence guiding them through the treacherous mountain paths. The coachman, an eerily strong and swift figure, exerts unnatural control over the horses, moving with inhuman speed and precision. Despite his growing unease, Harker finally arrives at the imposing castle, where he is greeted by Count Dracula, a tall, gaunt man with sharp features, piercing eyes, and an unsettlingly pale complexion. Dracula's hospitality is courteous yet unnerving. He speaks in perfect, albeit antiquated English and appears well educated, but there is something unnatural about his presence. Harker notices that his host has cold hands, an iron grip, and an unsettling habit of appearing suddenly and silently. Dracula never eats or drinks with him and seems to grow more intense whenever blood is mentioned. At first, Harker dismisses these peculiarities as eccentricities, but as the days pass, he begins to feel trapped. His unease deepens when he realizes he is a prisoner in the castle. Every door is locked, and there is no means of escape. His host only appears at night, and there are no servants to be seen. Harker's suspicions intensify when he accidentally cuts himself while shaving. The moment his blood is exposed, Dracula lunges toward him with a terrifying hunger in his eyes. But just as suddenly, he recoils at the sight of the crucifix Harker wears around his neck. This moment crystallizes Harker's growing horror. He is in the presence of something inhuman. Desperate to understand his situation, Harker explores the castle. He soon discovers that Dracula sleeps during the day in a crypt-like chamber, lying motionless in a coffin filled with earth. He also witnesses the Count scaling the castle walls like a lizard, defying gravity with ease. Panic sets in as Harker realizes he is at the mercy of a creature beyond his comprehension. He finds himself trapped not just physically, but mentally, as Dracula manipulates his mind, ensuring that any escape attempt is futile. One night, in his restless wanderings, Harker stumbles into a forbidden wing of the castle, where he encounters 3 beautiful but terrifying women. Their inhumanly pale skin, glowing eyes, and sharp fangs exude both beauty and horror. They approach him seductively, their intentions unmistakably sinister. Just as one leans in to bite his throat, Dracula intervenes, furiously throwing her aside. He claims Harker belongs to him and orders the women away, tossing them a small child as a substitute meal. Harker is left paralyzed with horror, fully realizing the monstrous nature of his host. Determined to escape before he meets the same fate, Harker devises a plan. He attempts to climb down the castle walls, hoping to find an exit. However, his exploration leads to an even more terrifying discovery. Several coffins, each containing sleeping figures, one of them being Dracula himself. With every passing day, the Count grows stronger, feeding on unseen victims, preparing for something sinister. Harker, now weak and desperate, makes one final attempt to flee. But as he does, the horror truly begins to unfold. Meanwhile, in England, Harker's fiancée, Mina Murray, and her friend, Lucy Westenra, exchange letters. Lucy, a young and beautiful woman, is being courted by 3 suitors: the Honorable Arthur Holmwood, the intellectual Dr. John Seward, and the rugged American Quincy Morris. Though she is charmed by all 3, she ultimately accepts Arthur's proposal. However, her carefree life is soon overshadowed by dark omens. She begins sleepwalking, drawn inexplicably toward the seaside, where something unseen seems to be calling her. Unbeknownst to them, Dracula's influence is spreading. A mysterious ship, the Demeter, sails toward the English coast, carrying an unseen horror. The crew begins to disappear one by one, with only the terrified captain left, lashing himself to the helm as he struggles to navigate the stormy seas. When the ship finally runs aground in Whitby, it is eerily empty, save for the captain's lifeless body and a massive black dog that leaps ashore and vanishes into the night. This creature is none other than Dracula himself, having arrived in England to unleash his reign of terror. As Mina worries over her absent fiancé, and Lucy succumbs to an unexplained illness, the stage is set for the dark forces that will soon engulf them all. Dracula has arrived, and the horror that began in Transylvania is about to spread, threatening not just Harker, but all those he holds dear. Jonathan Harker remains trapped in the eerie confines of Castle Dracula, his initial apprehensions turning into sheer terror as he becomes more attuned to the sinister nature of his host. His daily routine is disrupted by the increasingly strange and horrifying events unfolding around him. Dracula's demeanor shifts between polite host and menacing captor, his nocturnal habits becoming more pronounced. Jonathan notices that Dracula never eats with him, nor does he seem to cast a reflection in the mirror. When Harker accidentally cuts himself while shaving, Dracula lunges at his throat with an animalistic hunger, only to recoil upon seeing the crucifix that Jonathan wears around his neck. This chilling moment confirms Harker's suspicions that his life is in grave danger. As the days pass, Jonathan finds himself isolated. The castle, with its labyrinthine corridors and locked doors, feels like a prison. His attempts to explore are met with supernatural warnings, doors that seem to lock themselves, strange drafts that carry ghostly whispers, and distant howls that sound too human for comfort. Determined to understand his captor, Jonathan keeps a secret journal, documenting the Count's habits and the castle's unnerving atmosphere. One fateful evening, Jonathan defies Dracula's warning and ventures into a forbidden wing of the castle. He stumbles upon a grand, yet decaying room, its former opulence marred by cobwebs and dust. Exhausted, he collapses onto a settee, only to be roused by the presence of 3 stunning yet sinister women. Their beauty is hypnotic, their voices a melody of seduction and danger. As they draw closer, whispering in sultry tones, Jonathan is both enthralled and petrified. Just as one of the women leans in to sink her fangs into his neck, Dracula bursts into the room with an expression of furious authority. He claims Jonathan as his own and orders the women away, throwing them a small child wrapped in cloth as a cruel alternative. Jonathan watches in horror as the women gleefully descend upon their gruesome feast. Jonathan's days blur into a feverish cycle of anxiety and desperation. Dracula's intentions become clearer when he forces Jonathan to write deceptive letters to Mina, his fiancée, and his employer, assuring them of his well-being and delayed return. The Count's mastery over his prisoner is absolute. As the weeks drag on, Harker realizes that he is meant to be disposed of once he has served his purpose. Dracula prepares for his departure, arranging large wooden boxes filled with Transylvanian soil. Jonathan, sensing that his time is running out, plots his escape. The castle's walls are sheer, its exits sealed, but Harker's desperation pushes him to take risks. He watches from his window one night and sees the Count crawling headfirst down the stone walls of the castle like a monstrous lizard, confirming beyond doubt that his captor is no ordinary man. Meanwhile, in England, the narrative shifts to Mina Murray, Jonathan's devoted fiancée, who eagerly awaits news of him. Mina stays with her close friend Lucy Westenra, a young woman of exceptional beauty and charm, whose romantic prospects have recently taken a dramatic turn. Lucy receives 3 proposals in a single day, one from the Honorable Dr. John Seward, a physician who oversees a mental asylum, another from Quincy Morris, a spirited Texan adventurer, and the final one from Arthur Holmwood, the refined and noble son of Lord Godalming, whom she ultimately chooses. Despite the joy surrounding Lucy's engagement, Mina grows increasingly concerned about Jonathan's silence. His letters have become sporadic and vague, and she senses that something is terribly wrong. At the same time, Dr. Seward, who is heartbroken over Lucy's rejection, buries himself in his work at the asylum. One of his patients, Renfield, begins exhibiting increasingly bizarre behavior. Renfield, a man of erratic mood, swings, and unsettling obsessions, develops a disturbing habit of collecting and consuming living creatures, flies, spiders, and even birds, believing that he is accumulating their life force. He rants about his master coming, and despite Seward's scientific approach, there is something profoundly unnatural about Renfield's sudden bursts of lucidity, followed by violent outbursts. Back in Transylvania, Harker's situation becomes dire. Dracula prepares to leave for England, his coffins filled with earth serving as a means to sustain his power. Jonathan seizes his chance to escape when he finds the Count resting in one of the boxes, his eyes open yet vacant, his body corpse-like in the dim candlelight. Overcoming his revulsion, Jonathan attempts to kill Dracula with a shovel, but fails, realizing too late that his enemy is beyond mortal means. With no other choice, Harker makes a daring climb down the castle's outer wall, leaving his fate uncertain as he plunges into the rocky depths below. Dracula, now free to enact his plan, departs for England aboard the Russian schooner Demeter. The ship's journey across the sea is marked by dread and horror. One by one, the crew members vanish, their bodies never found. The ship's captain, realizing that some terrible force is preying on his men, keeps a desperate log of the ship's descent into chaos. He lashes himself to the wheel in a final attempt to steer the doomed vessel. only for it to crash onto the shores of Whitby during a fierce storm. The town's residents rush to the wreckage, finding only the lifeless captain, his face frozen in terror, and a large black dog that leaps from the ship and vanishes into the night. Unbeknownst to them, Count Dracula has arrived in England. The horror that was contained within the castle walls of Transylvania has now crossed into the modern world. The Count, no longer confined, begins his silent hunt, blending into London's bustling streets as an unassuming yet deadly predator. Meanwhile, Mina receives word that Jonathan has been found, barely alive, in a monastery in Budapest. With relief and fear mingling in her heart, she prepares to reunite with her beloved. But as she embarks on her journey, strange occurrences begin to plague Lucy, whose health starts to deteriorate inexplicably. She walks in her sleep, her skin grows paler by the day, and 2 small puncture wounds appear on her neck. Unseen and undetected, Dracula has set his sights on a new victim, and his reign of terror is only beginning. Jonathan Harker's journal continues as he remains trapped in Count Dracula's castle, desperately searching for a way to escape. Days turn into weeks, and he begins to understand the full extent of his imprisonment. Dracula only appears at night, often vanishing for long periods, leaving Jonathan alone with his growing fears. The eerie silence of the castle is punctuated by the distant howls of wolves and the occasional rustling sounds beyond locked doors. Harker, both terrified and resolute, knows he must act soon before he succumbs to the horrors surrounding him. One evening, after Dracula leaves the castle, Harker ventures into the forbidden areas. He discovers a crypt deep beneath the castle, where Dracula lies in a coffin filled with earth. The sight is grotesque. Dracula appears lifeless, yet his face is fuller, his lips crimson with fresh blood. Jonathan recoils in horror, realizing the Count's true nature. He desperately searches for a means to kill Dracula, but finds himself powerless without weapons or knowledge of how to destroy such an unnatural being. His only option is escape. He plans to climb down the castle walls and make a daring bid for freedom. However, as he prepares, he is confronted by the 3 vampire women who attempt to ensnare him once again. They whisper seductively, promising pleasure and death in equal measure. Just as they close in, Dracula returns and violently orders them away, claiming that Jonathan is his property. This encounter only strengthens Harker's resolve to flee, knowing his life hangs by a thread. Meanwhile, in England, Mina Murray, Jonathan's fiancée, eagerly awaits news of him. She spends time with her dear friend Lucy Westenra, a beautiful and vivacious young woman who has recently become engaged to Arthur Holmwood. Lucy is admired by many, including Dr. John Seward, a physician who runs a mental asylum, and Quincy Morris, an adventurous Texan. Both had proposed to Lucy before she accepted Arthur. Though heartbroken, they remain her devoted friends. Lucy and Mina share an inseparable bond, spending their days by the seaside in Whitby, a charming coastal town. It is here that an unsettling event takes place. An abandoned ship called the Demeter mysteriously washes ashore during a fierce storm. The crew is missing, and the captain is found dead, lashed to the helm with a crucifix in his hand. A large black dog is seen leaping from the ship and disappearing into the night. The ship's log, later discovered, reveals a chilling tale of a crew slowly disappearing one by one, culminating in the captain's desperate prayers before his death. Lucy begins to exhibit strange behavior following the ship's arrival. She becomes restless at night, sleepwalking under the moon's glow. Mina finds her one evening in the churchyard near Whitby Abbey, seemingly entranced, with a dark shadow looming over her. When Mina calls out, the figure vanishes, leaving Lucy weak and pale. Over the next few nights, Lucy's condition worsens. Her once radiant complexion fades, dark circles appear beneath her eyes, and she complains of inexplicable fatigue. Concerned, Mina notes small puncture wounds on Lucy's neck, but dismisses them as insignificant. The eerie events escalate when Lucy is found attempting to leave the house again at night, drawn towards some unseen force. Mina takes every precaution, locking the doors and ensuring Lucy remains safe. Meanwhile, Dr. Seward, troubled by one of his asylum patients, Renfield, notices increasingly erratic behavior. Renfield exhibits a fascination with consuming living creatures, flies, then spiders, then birds, believing he is absorbing their life force. He speaks cryptically about a coming master, a great presence he awaits. His agitation increases around the same time the Demeter arrives, and he becomes violent, desperately pleading for release, proclaiming that his master is near. Seward, puzzled by Renfield's ravings, remains unaware of the connection between him and the supernatural events unfolding in Whitby. As Lucy's condition declines, Mina receives long-awaited news of Jonathan. He has been found in a monastery in Budapest, gravely ill but alive. With urgency, she leaves England to be by his side. Upon her arrival, she discovers that Jonathan is physically weak and mentally shattered. He struggles to recall the horrors he endured at Dracula's castle, though fragments of the nightmare return in feverish dreams. Mina comforts him, offering steadfast love and support. Recognizing the torment he has suffered, she suggests they put the past behind them. The two are soon married, binding their fates together before returning to England. However, Jonathan remains troubled, unable to shake the dread lingering in his soul. Back in Whitby, Lucy's condition takes a dire turn. Arthur, deeply concerned, calls upon Dr. Seward for help. Despite Seward's medical expertise, he is at a loss to explain Lucy's rapid deterioration. In desperation, he seeks the aid of his former mentor, Professor Abraham van Helsing, a Dutch doctor with extensive knowledge in obscure diseases and the supernatural. Upon examining Lucy, Van Helsing immediately recognizes the signs of something unnatural at work. Though he does not disclose his suspicions, he insists that Lucy be given blood transfusions to restore her strength. Arthur, Seward, and Quincy each take turns donating their blood to save her. Despite these efforts, Lucy's condition continues to fluctuate. At times, she appears to recover, only to relapse worse than before. Van Helsing places garlic around her room and hangs a wreath around her neck, warning that these measures must never be removed. Yet, someone or something manages to undo his work, leaving Lucy vulnerable once more. The mysterious influence over Lucy intensifies. On a night when her caretakers lower their guard, she is found nearly lifeless, her beauty replaced by an eerie frailty. Her teeth appear sharper, and her breath comes in shallow gasps. Van Helsing, realizing they are running out of time, prepares to confront the unseen enemy. Meanwhile, Lucy's mother, unaware of the gravity of the situation, removes the garlic from her daughter's room, believing it unnecessary. That very night, a terrifying figure enters, and Lucy's fate is sealed. A wolf crashes through the window, and in the ensuing chaos, Lucy's mother dies of shock. Lucy herself, drained beyond salvation, mutters her final words, her voice carrying an unnatural sweetness. By morning, she is gone. Lucy's tragic death leaves her loved ones shattered. However, Van Helsing is not convinced that she has truly passed on. He warns the grieving Arthur that Lucy's body must not be left undisturbed. Seward and Quincy, though skeptical, agree to follow Van Helsing's lead. As the night deepens, Van Helsing prepares for what he knows is coming, aware that the true battle is only beginning. As Jonathan Harker struggles to recover from his harrowing experience in Transylvania, Mina remains blissfully unaware of the horrors he has endured. She is consumed with concern for her fiancé's well-being, eagerly awaiting any news of his fate. Meanwhile, her dear friend Lucy Westenra continues to be the center of social attention, torn between the affections of her three suitors: Dr. John Seward, the reserved but intelligent director of a lunatic asylum; Quincy Morris, the dashing and adventurous Texan; and Arthur Holmwood, the nobleman who ultimately wins Lucy's heart. Lucy, in her generous nature, expresses sorrow at rejecting Seward and Morris, though she is elated at her engagement to Arthur. While Mina visits Lucy in the coastal town of Whitby, a foreboding presence makes its way to England. A Russian schooner named the Demeter is found wrecked upon the shore, its captain's log detailing a terrifying journey across the sea. The crew had disappeared one by one under mysterious circumstances, leaving only the captain, who lashed himself to the helm in a final, desperate act. A large, black dog is seen leaping from the wreck and vanishing into the night, an ominous symbol of the evil that has now arrived on English soil. Soon after, Lucy begins exhibiting strange symptoms. She sleepwalks through the night with an unnatural pull toward the cliffs near the sea. One evening, Mina follows her and is horrified to find Lucy on a bench, a dark figure bending over her. Before Mina can make sense of what she sees, the figure disappears, and she finds Lucy weak and pale, with small red marks on her neck. Lucy recovers somewhat, but remains inexplicably tired and listless in the following days. Mina, deeply troubled, resolves to keep a close watch over her friend. During this time, Mina receives a letter from a convent in Budapest informing her that Jonathan is alive but gravely ill. Without hesitation, she rushes to his side, finding him a shadow of his former self. He refuses to speak of what happened in Transylvania, but is haunted by dreadful nightmares. Desperate to put the past behind him, he and Mina marry in a quiet ceremony, vowing to support each other through whatever trials lie ahead. Back in England, Lucy's condition continues to deteriorate. Her once vibrant energy is drained, and she grows weaker by the day. Arthur, worried sick over his fiancée's failing health, seeks the aid of Dr. Seward. Though a capable physician, Seward is baffled by her symptoms. He writes to his former mentor, Professor Abraham Van Helsing, a renowned expert in obscure diseases, hoping that he might shed light on Lucy's strange affliction. Van Helsing arrives in London and immediately takes an interest in Lucy's case. Though he does not disclose his suspicions, he treats her with blood transfusions, taking turns with Arthur, Quincy, and Seward to replenish her strength. Lucy momentarily improves, but her health relapses with each passing night. Van Helsing orders that her room be adorned with garlic flowers, an unusual but crucial step in protecting her from an unseen force. To everyone's surprise, Lucy sleeps peacefully that night, her color returning slightly. However, an unseen presence lingers over her, determined to claim its victim. Mina, now back in England, is relieved to see Jonathan slowly recovering, though he remains deeply troubled by his time in Transylvania. He confides in Mina and shows her his diary, which recounts his imprisonment at Castle Dracula. Though skeptical at first, Mina realizes that his horrors were real, and they both agree that if necessary, they will share this knowledge with those who need it. Meanwhile, Lucy's mother, unaware of the significance of the garlic, removes the flowers from her daughter's room. That same night, Lucy suffers another attack, and her condition worsens beyond measure. Van Helsing, realizing the gravity of the situation, enlists the help of the others to guard Lucy. But tragedy strikes again when her mother succumbs to shock after a wolf crashes through the window. In her final moments, Lucy appears to transform, her once gentle demeanor replaced by a ghastly expression of hunger and cruelty. Despite their desperate efforts, Lucy succumbs to the illness, and her death leaves her friends grief-stricken and bewildered. Though the men mourn Lucy's passing, Van Helsing remains troubled. He knows that Lucy's suffering is far from over. A series of disturbing reports soon emerge. Children are being attacked at night by a mysterious woman described as the Bloofer Lady. The victims speak of a beautiful but terrifying lady who lures them close before biting them, leaving them pale and weak. Van Helsing, recognizing the signs, reluctantly shares the grim truth with Seward, Arthur, and Quincy. Lucy has been transformed into a vampire. Though Arthur is horrified by the revelation, he agrees to accompany them to Lucy's tomb. Under the cover of night, they break into the crypt and find Lucy's coffin empty, confirming Van Helsing's fears. The next night, they witness her return, cradling a small child in her arms, her lips stained with blood. As she sees them, she drops the child and approaches Arthur with an unnatural seduction, her once loving gaze now filled with dark hunger. Before she can reach him, Van Helsing steps forward, brandishing a crucifix. Lucy recoils with a hiss and disappears into the night. Determined to end her suffering, the men return the next day. Arthur, though heartbroken, fulfills his duty, driving a stake through her heart. Lucy's face transforms, her expression of torment melting away into a peaceful repose. They seal the tomb once more, but their fight is only beginning. Van Helsing warns them that the true source of this horror, Count Dracula himself, still roams free. Armed with Jonathan's account of the Count's castle and Mina's meticulous organization of their collective knowledge, they prepare to track Dracula and put an end to his reign of terror. Though they do not yet know the extent of his power or the full danger they face, they are resolved to fight the darkness that has invaded their lives. With their circle strengthened by shared purpose and grief, they set their sights on the enemy lurking in the shadows, unaware of just how deadly the battle ahead will be. As the journey into the heart of darkness continues, the narrative takes a grim and unsettling turn. Van Helsing, Dr. Seward, Jonathan Harker, Mina, and Quincy Morris are now united by a singular purpose: unraveling the true nature of Count Dracula and thwarting his grip on England before it is too late. Lucy's tragic fate has left them all shaken, and though they have lost one of their own, her suffering fuels their determination. They must fight against a foe more cunning, more powerful, and more elusive than any human adversary. Mina, still fragile from her ordeal, has taken on a vital role in their mission. She transcribes and organizes their accounts, diary entries, and letters, weaving together the threads of their separate experiences into a cohesive record. Her methodical approach brings clarity to their scattered observations, allowing them to recognize patterns in Dracula's movements. Though she remains composed, Van Helsing is troubled by her pallor and the faint, growing shadows beneath her eyes. He watches her closely, suspecting that the Count's influence is not yet fully lifted from her. As they study the information at hand, one chilling fact becomes evident: Dracula has fled London. The group discovers that several boxes of his native Transylvanian soil have been secretly transported away. These boxes, necessary for his rest and regeneration, are key to his survival. If they can track them, they can find the vampire. They soon confirm their worst fear. Dracula has set sail, returning to his homeland where his strength is greatest. The Carpathian Mountains, shrouded in mist and legend, await his return. Jonathan, though physically recovered, is haunted by his past ordeal. The sight of Dracula's name fills him with an icy dread, but he refuses to let his fear control him. Mina, ever the source of quiet strength, reassures him that he is no longer alone in his struggle. Their bond, tested by horror, has only strengthened. But unbeknownst to the group, Mina has begun to change. She becomes increasingly fatigued, her nights restless, her features drawn. She dismisses their concerns, attributing it to the strain of their mission. Yet, in the dead of night, she wakes with an inexplicable chill, as though unseen eyes watch her from the darkness. Van Helsing's suspicions deepen when Mina's forehead reveals a telltale mark, a faint red wound, almost imperceptible. His worst fears are confirmed. Dracula has begun to exert his influence over her. She is becoming connected to him, much like Lucy had been before her transformation. The professor acts swiftly, forming a protective circle around her. The men swear to guard her with their lives, but Mina, understanding the danger she poses to them, all requests that they take precautionary measures against her should she succumb to the vampire's will. Her quiet courage moves them deeply. Realizing they must act before Dracula regains his full strength, they set their sights on pursuing him to Transylvania. Armed with their knowledge and their faith, they prepare for the arduous journey ahead. The vampire's power may be formidable, but they possess something he underestimates: the unwavering strength of human will and the power of unity. The pursuit begins. Jonathan, Van Helsing, and the others split into separate groups to intercept Dracula before he reaches his castle. The Count, sensing their movements, uses every trick at his disposal to evade them. Time is against them, and the harsh terrain slows their progress. Mina, still afflicted by the vampire's curse, remains at the heart of their mission. In moments of clarity, she experiences visions of Dracula's movements, an eerie connection forged between them. Though weakened, she is their greatest asset, her mind a window into the monster's path. As the chase reaches its climax, the group converges near Castle Dracula. The land is wild and desolate, the mountains looming ominously as the sun begins its descent. They know that if Dracula reaches the castle before sunset, he will be beyond their reach. Desperation fuels them as they press forward. The wind howls through the valleys, carrying with it an ancient, unspoken dread. Finally, they spot the Count's coffin-laden cart. A band of gypsies loyal to Dracula fiercely defends their master's passage. A violent struggle ensues. Blades clash, gunshots echo through the mountains, and the smell of blood fills the crisp air. The group fights with every ounce of their strength, knowing that failure means darkness prevailing. In the final breathless moments, Jonathan and Quincy manage to break through the defenses. As the coffin is thrown open, they come face to face with Dracula. The Count, though weakened by his journey, still radiates an aura of sheer malevolence. His eyes burn with hatred, his lips curl into a snarl. In a final, desperate act, Jonathan drives his blade into the vampire's heart, while Quincy delivers a fatal blow to his throat. A terrible, inhuman cry rips through the sky as Dracula's body begins to disintegrate. His skin turns to dust, his form collapsing into nothingness. The centuries-old reign of terror has come to an end, but victory comes at a cost. Quincy, mortally wounded in the battle, succumbs to his injuries. With his dying breath, he takes solace in knowing that Dracula has been vanquished and that Mina is free from his influence. The group mourns their fallen friend, forever grateful for his sacrifice. With the nightmare finally over, Jonathan and Mina return to England, their love unbroken despite all they have endured. Van Helsing, having fulfilled his mission, quietly disappears into the annals of history, his work done. The darkness that once threatened to consume them has been driven away by the unyielding light of courage, friendship, and faith. Though Dracula has been destroyed, the echoes of his evil linger in their memories. They understand that there will always be those who seek to spread darkness, but they also know that as long as good people stand against it, evil will never truly prevail. As the relentless pursuit of Count Dracula reaches its final stage, Jonathan Harker, Dr. Van Helsing, Mina Harker, Dr. Seward, Arthur Holmwood, and Quincy Morris race against time. They know that if Dracula returns to his stronghold in Transylvania, he will regain his full power, becoming almost impossible to destroy. Every moment counts, and with Mina's supernatural connection to him, they are able to track his movements. Dracula, sensing the threat, takes every precaution. He has bribed local Romani gypsies to guard his coffin, ensuring his safe passage. Meanwhile, Mina, though still resisting the vampire's influence, feels an eerie pull to him. Van Helsing, ever watchful, notes the strange changes in her skin pale, her eyes distant, as if part of her is trapped between the living and the undead. He knows that if Dracula is not stopped soon, Mina's transformation may become irreversible. The group splits up in an effort to intercept the Count. Van Helsing and Mina travel by carriage toward Castle Dracula, where Van Helsing intends to cleanse the land of its lingering evil. Jonathan, Quincy, and the others, armed and determined, race toward the convoy carrying Dracula's coffin. The chase is treacherous, the roads winding and dangerous, the air thick with the looming presence of something unnatural. At the castle, Van Helsing and Mina arrive to find the place eerily silent. The ancient fortress, home to centuries of bloodshed and horror, stands ominous against the evening sky. Mina, though exhausted, feels a strange familiarity, as if something inside is calling to her. But Van Helsing has come prepared. He gathers his tools, garlic, holy water, sacred wafers, ready to break Dracula's hold over the land. Inside the castle, he discovers the resting places of the 3 female vampires who have long served Dracula. Their beauty is otherworldly, but Van Helsing knows their true nature. As they awaken and attempt to seduce and overpower him, he acts swiftly, driving a stake through each of their hearts. Their deathly shrieks echo through the castle, and as their bodies wither into dust, the curse upon this place begins to weaken. The shadows that had clung to the walls seem to retreat, as if the grip of evil is beginning to loosen. Meanwhile, Jonathan and Quincy close in on the Romani caravan carrying Dracula's coffin. The gypsies, fiercely loyal to the Count, fight to defend it, brandishing weapons and blocking their advance. The battle is brutal. Blades clash, bullets fire, and in the chaos, both Jonathan and Quincy sustain injuries. But they press forward, determined to end this once and for all. As the sun begins to set, the moment of reckoning arrives. Jonathan reaches the coffin just as Dracula's eyes snap open, his body beginning to stir. With one final act of defiance, Jonathan slashes his throat while Quincy drives his blade into Dracula's heart. The Count lets out a final, unearthly cry before his body crumbles into dust. But the victory comes at a cost. Quincy, mortally wounded, collapses. As he takes his final breaths, he smiles, knowing they have won. Mina, now freed from Dracula's curse, rushes to his side, but there is nothing more they can do. With his last words, Quincy reassures them that his sacrifice was worth it, and then he is gone. With Dracula destroyed, the nightmare ends. The group, battered but victorious, returns home. Mina, no longer under the vampire's shadow, gradually regains her strength. She and Jonathan rebuild their lives, forever changed but determined to move forward. Years later, Jonathan and Mina name their son after Quincy Morris, honoring the friend who gave his life to rid the world of Dracula's evil. The events that transpired fade into memory, yet the knowledge remains. Darkness is always waiting, and only through vigilance and courage can it be kept at bay.